Sexology, the basis of endocrinology and criminology by Samael Onveor. Third part. Chapter. The human mind. The brain has 5 fundamental parts. 1. The encephalon. 2. The cerebrum. 3. The midbrain, mesencephalon. 4. The medulla oblongata, or hindbrain. 5. The pons or breech. Indeed, those who state that the encephalon governs the intelligence, memory, willpower, etc., ignore the existence of the mental body. Those people should study all the volumes of the secret doctrine written by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. The brain is made in order to elaborate thought, yet it is not the thought. The brain is an instrument of the mind, yet it is not the mind. We must distinguish between the brain and the mind. We must study the intimate relations of the brain with the mind. In our former chapters, we spoke about the astral body. In those chapters, we stated that the mind, the psychic and spiritual principles of the human being are within the astral body. The mind is a marvelous subtle body that has its own ultrabiology and ultrapathology that is in intimate relation with the central nervous system and the brain. Thought is a function of the mental body. The human being can think without the physical brain. He can think independently without the aid of cerebral matter. This has already been demonstrated in scientific laboratories where some disincarnated entities were materialized. We are stating concrete facts that are already demonstrated. If the reader still has not read anything about the materializations of Katie King in the laboratory of Sir William Crookes with the help of the Fox sisters, the mediums for materialization, then we recommend to do it. The concrete fact is that the astral body of the defunct Katie King materialized over 3 consecutive years in the already mentioned scientific laboratory. Then, the scientists saw, heard, touched, etc. the entity. Katie King allowed herself to be submitted to all types of experiments. There were no frauds there, because the scientists controlled the experiments to prevent even the slightest possibility of fraud. After 3 years of experimentation, Katie King, before many photographic cameras, slowly dematerialized. She left for the scientists a materialized lock of her hair as final proof of the reality of her materialization. We are, therefore, stating facts that have already been demonstrated. The encephalon is governed by the mind, yet the mind is not governed by the encephalon. The encephalon is the instrument of emotions and of the consciousness, yet the encephalon neither produces emotions nor consciousness. What is logical cannot be refuted by ignorance. Logic is logic. The people who affirm that the brain produces thought, emotion, and consciousness are ignorant, because they have not studied the mental body. So, we cannot, based on our ignorance, refute what is factual. It is necessary for the ignorant to study. The 12 pairs of cranial nerves demonstrate to us the Hermetic principle that states, as above, so below. If above there is a zodiac with 12 constellations, also here below there is a zodiacal human being with 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Each pair of nerves controls some region of the physical body. The 12 pairs of nerves control all the 12 parts of the zodiac human being. Those nerves are olfactory nerves, optic nerves, oculomotor nerves, trochlear nerves, trigeminal nerves, abducens nerves, facial nerves, vestibulocochlear nerves, glossopharyngeal nerves, vagus nerves, spinal nerves, hypoglossal nerves. These 12 pairs of nerves inform the mind of all that happens in the human zodiac. The office that collects that information is the brain, and the office worker is the mind. Thus, the organs of the senses of external perception collect the information that comes from the exterior world. Then, the information passes into the cerebral office where the office worker, the mind, analyzes and studies it. Unfortunately, the office worker has always a bad secretary who betrays him. That bad secretary is the I, the myself, the ego. For instance, we go to the movie theater where we watch an erotic movie. There, the office worker within his cerebral suite collects all the perceptions. The office worker studies the movie, he contemplates it, he enjoys himself with it. Thereafter, the secretary, by his own whim, on the sly and in secrecy, plunders the erotic images and reproduces them in nature's mental plane. This is how these images convert themselves into living effigies of the mental plane. Later on, during our normal sleep, the mind, bottled up with the eye, fornicates with those mental effigies. This is why nocturnal pollutions occur. The dreamer fornicates with the mental images that he, himself, created. The dreamer clairvoyantly sees those images. This is what is called unconscious clairvoyance. Someone is jealous and supposes that a friend of his is having an affair with his spouse. Thus, his jealous eye, with those fantasy pictures he created, elaborates a drama in secrecy. Then, nocturnal dreams occur, and he sees horrible dramas where his spouse is committing adultery with his friend and many other terrible things. This is what is called unconscious clairvoyance. If the clairvoyant is an oligophrenic, then he will vilely assassinate his friend. If he is neurasthenic, he then will insult, calumniate, and finally assassinate him. If he is paranoid, he then will intellectually plan a technical and perfect assassination. If he is schizophrenic, he will violently break that friendship. If he is a sadomasochist, he will assassinate his spouse in the most horrible way. If he is a very cultured schizoid with a genotypic epileptic base, he then can receive a very intense emotional shock that will make him commit the crime of homicide and will afterwards fall into a complete psychic state of collapse. The majority of clairvoyants fall into the abyss of delinquency because of their lack of culture and intellectual discipline. Let us suppose that a clairvoyant distrusts a friend because he assumes that he is a black magician. For that reason, within his unconsciousness he elaborates the most terrible forms. Thereafter, these forms appear in his dreams. This is unconscious clairvoyance. This is why he can suffer a tremendous situational reaction that will take him into crime, calumny, public slander, defamation of character, assassination, etc. All unconscious clairvoyant perceptions enter the cerebellum. Thereafter, the cerebellum transfers those perceptions through the cell groups of the pons or breach into the cerebrum. So, when they enter the cerebrum, the unconscious perceptions become conscious. The pons connects the midbrain with the medulla and with the two famous cerebral hemispheres. In ancient times, the medulla oblongata constituted the whole brain, which could perfectly control all the cells of the human organism. The medulla contains 7 functional centers that govern sneezing, coughing, suction, mastication, deglutition, regurgitation, the functions of the salivary and gastric glands, and the closing of the eyelids. The midbrain is also very interesting. Part of it joins the 2 cerebral hemispheres with the cerebellum and the pons or breach. Clairvoyant perceptions pass through the pons. All the centers that govern the human organism are located within the functional areas of the brain. Oftentimes a clairvoyant perception is recorded in a fixed way within one cerebral cell. This is similar to an image that is recorded on photographic film. In this case, the mind perceives that unconscious clairvoyant image at all hours. Surgeons have resolved that problem by extirpating the cell where the image is recorded. A concrete case of unconscious clairvoyance in homicide was the assassination of the great Colombian politician Jorge Eliezer Gaitan. The authorities' investigation had shown that the assassin was an active member of the school AMRC from San Jose, California. It was also stated that he was expelled from that school because they considered him a mentally unbalanced individual. That personage was an unconscious clairvoyant. He lit a pair of candles in front of his altar, in accordance with an AMORC Rosicrucian ritual. Thus, in the mirror he saw 2 images, Simon Bolivar and Francisco de Paula Santander, who was Simon Bolivar's enemy. Therefore, the assassin told himself, if Santander tried to kill me in my past reincarnation, now in my present existence I will take revenge on him and I will kill him. Thus, the 9th of April, the day of the events, he treacherously killed Jorge Eliezer Gaitan when this politician was leaving the government palace of Bogota. The experts on ballistics considered that before that homicide the assassin had to have practiced a lot at the target range, since the 3 shots in the victim's back were well aimed, exact, and precise. What happened afterwards was frightful. This Bogotanian assassin astonished the whole world. The excited crowds launched themselves to battle against the government. If, in the middle of such a situation, the cunning of a very fox-like liberal politician had not been present, the populace would have taken the presidential palace. The former narrative is a concrete example of homicide and unconscious clairvoyance. There is no doubt that the vision in the mirror was the secret source of that crime. The political enemies of Gaetan made the rest. Possibly, they financed that crime, they bought the assassin, etc. The secret source of this crime was unconscious clairvoyance. The unbalanced mind of the assassin created the images that were projected into the mirror. This is all. Unconscious clairvoyance is the secret cause of 100% of homicides. Forensic psychiatry needs to expand itself a little more. Oftentimes, the perceptions from unconscious clairvoyance remain deposited within the unconscious depths of the human mind. Those perceptions convert themselves into secret temptation, which is the cause of many crimes. In the depths of every human being there are many unconscious factors that can cause one to commit homicide. The secret sources of any crime are unconscious. Many saints had unconsciousness filled with carnal passion, sadism, robbery, crime, violence, jealousy, hatred, resentments, etc. During the dream state those saints suffered horribly. During their dreams, those saints fell into the most frightful crimes. Within their unconsciousness, those saints were great evildoers. When they awakened from their dreams, they understood their frightful moral misery. Thus, this is why they were performing terrible penances and covering themselves with sackcloth. Those who achieve making a moral defect into awakened consciousness will attain the total disintegration of that defect. When a human being disintegrates all of his defects, then his I is dissolved. The truth comes into us when the I is dissolved. This is how we become perfect clairvoyants. The truth is born from creative comprehension. The truth is non-temporal, eternal, and divine. The I cannot know the truth, because the I is just a bunch of memories. The I is of time. The I is born in time and dies in time. Death is just a subtraction of fractions. After finishing the mathematical operation, death, only the values remain. Later on, those values return into newborn physical bodies. Those values are the I, the myself, the returning ego. Therefore, the I is just an illusion. Any crime, any felony, and any vice are the fatal outcome of the affirmation of the I, of the myself. The origin of pain is within the I. The I is dissolved when we annihilate desire. Where the truth abides, the I cannot abide, because the truth and the I are incompatible. The I is a transitory error of the wheel of samsara, the wheel of reincarnation and karma. The I is the heresy of separatism. Point 1. The I is the origin of egotism, hatred, fornication, adultery, envy, anger, etc. The I is the thirst of pleasures and the source of pride and vanity. Therefore, in order to incarnate the truth, one needs to dissolve the I. In order to attain internal peace, one needs to dissolve the I, the myself. In order to acquire perfect clairvoyance and supreme illumination, one needs to dissolve the I. The truth is the internal Christ of every human being. The I is the Satan that we carry inside. Where the I is, the truth cannot be. Those who divide themselves into two I's, one superior and another inferior, walk upon the path of error. Those who affirm the existence of a divine I are making Satan godly. There is no such thing as a separated individual spirit. There is only the universal spirit of life. Therefore, the immortal spark, spirit, of every human being is the being that is one with the universal spirit filled with supreme happiness. Chapter: The Infraconsciousness. Infraconscious clairvoyance is commonly qualified and known by the name nightmares. Also, there are sleep drunkenness 1 and the hypnic twilight state. Sleep drunkenness has a longer duration than the hypnic twilight state. In sleep drunkenness, the cerebral cortex is involved not as a cause but as vehicle called dream consciousness, reflected as distinct variations of sleepwalking. In the hypnic twilight state, there is intense action of the mesencephalon, midbrain. This intense action is not the cause, but the effect of certain short circuits from psycho-infraconscious currents. These originate psychic effects and automatic acts that are sometimes criminal. In sleep drunkenness, there is subsequent lacunar amnesia 3 with distinct degrees and traces. In the hypnic twilight state, the sensation of amnesia caused by definitively automatic action does not exist. The common factor of both phenomena of psychic origin is the inhibition of normal consciousness by the natural process of the dream state. Now, we mention a case of infraconscious clairvoyance cited by Schwarzer. A woman from Pest dreamed that a dog chased her, and she was trying to reject it by stoning it. She, awakened by that nightmare, took her little girl who was sleeping by her side and threw her with violence, as if she was a stone, against the wall in order to scare the vicious dog. Let us see another case of infraconscious clairvoyance cited by Kraft-Tabang. Sargant Simmons said, at 1:30 this morning, I heard a female voice, "Oh, my children. Save my children." I went to the house and found a mother who was in her nightdress and in an extremely excited and perturbed state. Everything in the place was in great confusion. She kept on crying out, "Where's my baby? Have they caught it? I must have thrown it out of the window." She told me that she had been dreaming that her little boy had said that the house was on fire, and that what she had done was with the view of preserving her children from being burnt to death. The window had not been thrown up. The child was thrust through a pane of glass. J.C. Bucknell and D.H. Tuke, A Manual of Psychological Medicine. We have found another case of infraconscious clairvoyance on page 203 in a book written by Drs. Diaz-Padrón and E.C. Enriquez. Very late one night, a man who was alone in his apartment was dreaming that bandits were assaulting his home. Very strong knocks were heard from the door that was next to the stairs. The tenant awoke and rose holding a gun in his hand. He opened the door and shot the gun without seeing or aiming at anyone. The bullet shot a young boy who carried an urgent telegram. When the homicidal one saw the deliverer of the telegram falling, he then became aware that he had just wounded an innocent person. In that moment, he completely awoke. Those nightmares and evil dreams are phenomena of infraconscious clairvoyance that can originate false conclusions, resulting in crime. When the clairvoyant is a neurasthenic occultist or esotericist, he can then become a premeditator and perfidious assassin. A neurasthenic type occultist student was dreaming of a citizen. With his infraconscious clairvoyance, he saw that citizen tormenting him with witchcraft and black magic. A few days later, the neurasthenic insulted and threatened to death the perplexed and astonished citizen. This type of infraconscious vision with premeditation, calumny, and perfidy is very common in some occultist and spiritual students, etc. The lack of mental appreciation of the infraconsciousness by esotericist or spiritual clairvoyance is due to fanaticism and ignorance. The mental disorder of ignorant fanatics is due to superstitious fear, to suggestion, and also to the lower aggressive instincts of their psychotypic I. As the infraconsciousness is within the human being, likewise it is within nature. The tenebrous memories of the whole history of the earth and of its root races are deposited within the infraconsciousness of nature. Antediluvian monsters live within the infraconsciousness of nature. These are the specters of the past, the nightmare phantoms. The infraconscious clairvoyant only perceives the cavernous memories of the past and the tenebrous creations from the infraconscious lower depths of the human beings and beasts. In the infraconsciousness of nature there is only fatality. Every human being has a double, an opposite, who lives within the infraconsciousness of nature. Facing Buddha, we find his brother and enemy Devdatta, the king of hell. Facing Anail, the angel of love, we find Lilith for the antithesis of love. An infraconscious clairvoyant may see the double of someone and thereafter deduce erroneous conclusions whose final outcome is calumny, homicide, etc. The infraconsciousness is the tenebrous remnant from a remote past. A sadomasochist is a sexual pervert that can assassinate his spouse just for pure sexual pleasure. This sexual perversion is infraconscious. The infraconscious values of the psychological I constitute the lowest animal depths of the human being. The tyrannical, obsessive, sexual perversion of the sadomasochist is the concrete manifestation of his infraconscious values. When this genre of infraconscious values flourishes in his mind, the human being falls into crimes like homosexuality, stupor, force, violence, corruption of minors, etc. Sometimes, such a sexual pervert becomes a mystic, an ignoramus, a sanctimonious one, etc. We knew the case of a mystical sexual pervert who gave coins to 6- and 7-year-old girls for their candies. This is how he was cultivating them while they were growing up. Later, he seduced them sexually, and finally, in order to avoid conflicts and problems, he engaged them with other men. Nonetheless, that Satyr V was a mystic spiritualist who, filled with sweetness, was always smiling. He was a hierarch from a spiritual society. Oftentimes, the sexual perversion of the infraconsciousness places its satyrs in the arena of compulsive psychoneurosis that causes them to commit the most terrible crimes registered by the police news chronicles. Sexual infraconscious perversion has two very well-defined poles, the brain and sexuality. Thieves are positive, plus symbol, prostitutes are negative, minus symbol. These are the two poles of the human infraconsciousness. Observe the intimate psychic affinity that exists between prostitutes and thieves. These two poles of the human infraconsciousness live in an eternal struggle within each individual. We clearly see in the example of the spiritual satyr cited in this present chapter the struggle of the infraconsciousness. The satyr's brain cultivates the girls with coins for their candies and waits a little while for their maturity. Then, the satyr's sexuality possesses and consummates the crime of seduction. The satyr's brain projects and plans. Afterwards, he engages the girls with other men in order to avoid conflicts. Behold here the struggle between brain and sexuality. Many times the infraconsciousness betrays a virtuous spouse and carries her towards adultery. Many prostitutes, who in their past were magnificent spouses, live in brothels. When the sexual perversion of these harlots polarizes itself in their brain, drained by pleasure, they then commit terrible crimes that take them to jail. These incarcerated, unhappy women feel themselves victims of human injustice. They consider themselves innocent. Indeed, those women are victims of an energy that they ignore. No one has cured such unhappy women. Not a single psychiatrist has taught them how to use and drive their sexual energy. They do not know the great mysteries of sex. They are victims of a society that, after perverting them, despises and miserably humiliates them. Society corrupts these unhappy women, daughters of pain, in order to confine them within horrible panopticons and jails where they only end up perverting themselves still more. The infraconsciousness cannot be confined within jails. The delinquent does not reform himself in jails. The jail system is a complete failure. Inside jails, the delinquents multiply their hatred and rancor against society. The sexual problems in jails, the homosexuality and all kinds of filthy vices against nature, are showing us until satiation that the infraconsciousness cannot be confined within jails. The biggest sin is ignorance. Only with a wise educational psychotherapy can the reform of delinquents be achieved. The corrective educational treatment within jails can transform them into true reformatory schools. Jails should not exist. There should be only reformatory schools, etc. In these schools, the delinquents can be cured with educational psychotherapy. Convicts must be treated with infinite love and mercy. Chapter: The Subconsciousness. When a criminal is psychogenically analyzed, subconscious factors have to be taken into account. These types of factors are reduced into three, namely: genotype, inheritance/genetics; phenotype, education; paratype, circumstances. The upright social conduct of any individual is the outcome of perfect equilibrium among these three factors. When there is disequilibrium among these three factors, the outcome is crime. These three factors can be positive or negative. They are positive when they manifest as upright thoughts, upright feelings, and upright actions. They are negative when they manifest as criminal thoughts, criminal feelings, and criminal actions. Let us study these three factors separately. Inheritance/genetics. Inheritance is the vehicle of karma, nemesis, or law of destiny. Here, we are not asking you to believe, you may not believe in it. However, what we need is to analyze and to profoundly delve into the distinct inner depths of the mind. Concerning beliefs, to say, I believe or I do not believe, is proper for ignorant people. We are mathematicians in our scientific investigations and very demanding in our analysis and our expression. Death is a subtraction operation. When that arithmetic operation is finished, only the values remain. These values are what continue. These values constitute the psychological I, the myself, the ego, that reincarnates in order to satisfy its frustrated desires and in order to continue existing though a new personality. The I is a bunch of memories, passions, desires, hatreds, violence, lust, greed, etc. The I constitutes those values. Those energetic values are anterior to the seminal germinal cell. If we investigate all the intraatomic and interatomic states of the seminal germinal cell, we only find electricity and magnetism. We are not establishing dogmas. Let us perform the test. Let us take the seminal germinal cell into an atomic physics laboratory. Thus, if we split the atom of the seminal germinal cell, we will liberate energy, because according to atomic physics, any atom is an exponent of energies. If a scientific clairvoyant analyzes those liberated energies of the atom from the seminal germinal cell, he then will find the reincarnating ego, the values. Existence begins with the cell that is elaborated within the man's testicles and prostate. This cell, sperm, is decapitated when entering within the maternal ovum. The factors of inheritance are deposited in the genes. The word gene comes from the same Greek root that originates the words genesis, generation, genre, etc. The genes are within small bar forms that are named chromosomes. Paternal and maternal inheritance is in within the genes. Inheritance is the vehicle of the cruel nemesis of life. Inheritance is the outcome of karma, the law of action and consequence, nemesis. For with what measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. Matthew 7 verse 2. As the action is, so will the consequence be. This is the law. We carry the outcome of our past evil deeds within our inheritance. Axiomatically speaking, we state the following: evil actions are the causa causorum of inheritance. This axiom is comprehensible when we understand the law of reincarnation and of nemesis, karma. The values of a man who was an artist will reincarnate in a family of artists who will provide the necessary genetic inheritance for him. A sum of mystical values will reincarnate among compassionate people. The values of a libertine person will reincarnate among libertine people. The values of an assassin will reincarnate among assassins and thieves. It has happened many times, cases of saints reincarnating among bandits and vice versa. When this happens, it is the law of destiny adjusting accounts. We carry within our subconsciousness all of that inheritance. The factors of our inheritance betray us many times. Education. Now, let us analyze education. This second factor of the subconsciousness is very important. Education begins at home. The child learns more through example than from precept. In modern homes, the child witnesses the adultery of his parents. The child is an eyewitness of the anger, greed, and lust of those who gave him life. The child sees with astonishment in his home the revolver or the rifle of his father and the magazines or tales of assassins and thieves, etc. The child goes to the movies where he enjoys watching scenarios of detectives against thieves who assault people in the roads or who assault banks. When the night of Christmas or any other holiday arrives, the child receives cannons, revolvers, and pistol toys. So, the child can then play as a bandit or a thief who assaults people in the roads, etc. All of these are stored in the subconsciousness of the child. The child's parents are the ones who poison him little by little with the fatal venom of delinquency. Time passes, the child grows, and the ideas of crime that were deposited within his subconsciousness develop, evolve, and progress. This subconsciously occurs even when the child's vital conscious part ignores everything that happens within the profound regions of his subconsciousness. Any given day the fruit, ideas of crime, ripens and the harvest is crime. Everything that is sown within the subconsciousness flourishes in the mind over time. The situational reaction of a homicidal one who never wanted to kill is the fatal outcome what he learned as a child. The new gangster, the street-smart thief, the new bugler who was a good citizen, is the outcome of a false education. Pornographic, erotic novels and movies engender prostitution, seduction, and abduction with force and violence, etc. The pornographic movie actors and writers are teaching perversities to the subconsciousness of children and adults. Therefore, the time has arrived to fight against moral corruption from the prostitutes of intelligence. The child learns in school bloody histories of slyness, maliciousness, distrust, etc., that are recorded within the subconsciousness. With all of this recorded within the subconsciousness, the fatal outcome is crime. Circumstances. Now, let us study circumstances, certain critical circumstances that irritate the subconsciousness and provoke criminal reactions. Objective circumstances combine themselves with similar subconscious circumstances within the subconsciousness in order to provoke crime. Objective and subjective images combine themselves in order to provoke crime. Example: an unemployed man, hungry and miserable, remembers having seen in his infancy his father in the same crisis. Then, he remembers that in order to solve the problem his father assaulted a person in the streets and robbed him. Then he remembers the good food that was served at the table of his home after the robbery, etc. Therefore, the critical circumstance of the unemployed man together with the circumstance of his subconscious remembrance combine and provoke the crime. Synthesis. The three factors genotype, phenotype, and paratype are the psychogenesis of every criminal act. Crime can be extirpated from its most intimate roots only with an integral culture. Crime can be extirpated from the mind only with an integral culture. The subconscious clairvoyant perceives the history of the human race through the centuries. The memories of all our past reincarnations live within our subconsciousness. Oftentimes, when seeing a remembrance, a subconscious clairvoyant falls into crime. For example, it can happen that a subconscious clairvoyant may clairvoyantly see his loyal spouse committing adultery. The clairvoyant is sure of his vision. He knows the word hallucination has been invented by ignoramuses in order to disguise their ignorance. He knows that the vision exists. If the clairvoyant is a non-cultured individual without intellectual discipline of any kind, then he will react in accordance to his biopsychological eye. If he is a neurasthenic clairvoyant, he will treacherously assassinate his spouse after having vilely slandered her as an adulterer. The paranoid clairvoyant will intellectually plan a very intelligent crime. The epileptic type of clairvoyant will momentarily react with an explosive outburst of brutal anger. Then, after having broken through his explosive anger, his phenotypic superstructure of personal control created by his social habits and his education, he will madly drag himself to assassinate his virtuous and loyal spouse. The oligophrenic clairvoyant would commit a filthy and horrifying crime. This is how he would assassinate his loyal spouse. The schizophrenic clairvoyant would abandon her immediately. The sadomasochist clairvoyant would assassinate her during the very sexual act or after it. These are the dangers of subconscious clairvoyance. The clairvoyant does not doubt his vision. He thinks that his vision is not a hallucination. If the subconscious clairvoyant does not study psychiatry, theosophy, psychology, Rosicrucianism, etc., he can then fall into the most horrifying crimes. The loyal spouse of our example could have been an adulterer in her past reincarnation. Therefore, the clairvoyant without discipline and intellectual culture will ignore what the past and the subconsciousness are. The outcome of his ignorance and his lack of culture is crime, public slander, etc. In many spiritual schools, the subconscious clairvoyants may skin their neighbors alive. They calumniate the innocent. They accuse them of witchcraft, sorcery, black magic, adultery, robbery, extortion, etc. Nobody escapes them. They slander everyone. It is peculiar to see those subconscious clairvoyants as proud ignoramuses who boast of being wise. They foretell infamies. They torment their neighbors by accusing good citizens. They base their actions on their subconscious clairvoyance. They clairvoyantly see people in the old past of their ancient lives, committing errors that in their present life they are incapable of committing. The penal code should also punish the calumniator clairvoyants. Constantly, we hear those subconscious calumniator clairvoyants utter phrases such as the following: "That fellow is a black magician and he is putting a spell on me," or "The lady X is committing adultery with the gentleman Y." They affirm it, even when the slandered woman may be a saint. Those clairvoyant ignoramuses lack respect for others. Nevertheless, we cannot blame their clairvoyance. Indeed, the sixth sense is as natural and normal as the eyes, the ears, the olfactory sense, the mouth, and the sense of touch. The clairvoyant is not to blame for those errors. The cause of all of those errors is the lack of intellectual culture and the lack of respect towards our neighbor. The memories of all of those errors that we committed in our past reincarnations live within our subconsciousness. The clairvoyant without intellectual culture sees all of those errors from the past, then he gets confused, and the outcome is calumny against just and honorable people. The cultured clairvoyant, the intellectual clairvoyant, who has studied psychiatry, theosophy, psychology, Rosicrucianism, etc., does not fall into such errors, because he has intellectual discipline. The cultured, educated, respectful, and intellectually disciplined clairvoyant enjoys illuminated intellection. He knows how to read the subconsciousness of nature with complete cognizance. The cultured, educated, respectful, and intellectually disciplined clairvoyant is capable of retrospectively studying the whole history of the earth and its root races. He is an illuminated clairvoyant. Chapter: The Superconsciousness. The most elevated kind of clairvoyance in the universe is superconsciousness. All of the avatars or messengers from the superior worlds have been supercognizant clairvoyants. Hermes Trismegistus, Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus Christ, etc., were supercognizant beings, messengers from the superior worlds, initiators of new eras of historic evolution. Imagination, inspiration, and intuition are the three obligatory ways of initiation. We are going to examine each one of the three steps separately. Let us begin with imagination. For the wise, to imagine is to see. Imagination is the translucence of the soul. What is important is to learn to concentrate thought on one thing only. Whosoever learns to think on only one thing makes marvels and prodigies. The disciple that wants to reach imaginative knowledge must learn to concentrate himself and know how to profoundly meditate. The best exercise in order to attain imaginative knowledge is the following. While seated in front of a plant, we concentrate on it until forgetting everything that is not related with it. Then, by closing the eyes, we become drowsy, and we keep in our imagination the form and figure of the plant, its structure, perfume, and color. The disciple will imagine the living cells of the plant. The disciple must provoke drowsiness during these practices. The disciple, while in drowsiness, will profoundly meditate on the internal constitution of the plant. It possesses protoplasm, membrane, and nucleus. The protoplasm is a viscous, elastic, and transparent substance, similar to the egg white, albuminoid matter. The disciple, while in drowsiness, must reflect upon the four fundamental elements in the protoplasm of the cell of the plant. These four elements are carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. The membrane is a marvelous substance without color, a substance within which the water becomes totally insoluble. This substance is the well-known cellulose. The disciple, while concentrated, will imagine the nucleus of the cell as a small corpuscule, where the great universal life palpitates. The nuclear filament is within the nucleus, as well as the nuclear juice and the nucleolus, which are all covered by the nuclear membrane. The nucleolus is formed by corpuscules infinitely full of shining beauty. These are residual products of the incessant reactions of the plant organism. The disciple, while well concentrated, must imagine with complete logical precision all of those mineral substances and organic combinations that are harmoniously unfolding within the cellular protoplasm of the plant. Let us think on the grains of starch and on the portentous chlorophyll, without which it is impossible to reach perfect organic synthesis. The chlorophyll is presented in granulated form, chloroleucite, as a very beautiful yellow color, xanthophilia, that becomes that precious green color of the plant while under the solar rays. Every plant is a perfect cellular community with incalculable perfections. The student, filled with a mystical attitude and enchanted by the exuberant beauty of the plant, must meditate on the perfection of the plant and in all of its scientific processes. The mystic is in rapture when remembering all of the phenomena of nutrition, relation, and reproduction of each cell of the plant. Let us see the chalice of the flower. Here are its sexual organs. Here is the pollen, the masculine reproductive element. Here is the pistil or genesium, a very precious feminine organ, with its ovary, stylus, and stigma. The ovary is a sac full of marvelous ova. The stamen can occupy different positions in relation with the pistil, for instance insertion beneath the ovary, insertion around the ovary, or above it. Fecundation is verified with the function of the feminine germs and masculine gametes. After exiting the anther, the pollen, the masculine gamete, reaches the ovary of the plant where the ovum, the feminine gamete, is anxiously waiting. The seed is the precious and enchanted ovum that, after being fecundated, is transformed and grows. Now the student should remember the step on which he is meditating. A sprout will emerge as a delicate bud. Imagine it growing slowly, until seeing it with your imagination spreading branches, leaves, and flowers. Remember that everything that is born must die. Imagine the plant's process of dying. Its flowers wither, its leaves dry, and the wind blows them away. Finally, only a few twigs remain. This process of birth and death is marvelous. By meditating on the whole process of birth and death of a plant, by meditating on its marvelous life, if the concentration is perfect and drowsiness achieves a profound level, then the chakras of the astral body will spin, develop, and unfold. Meditation must be correct. The mind must be exact. Logical thought and exact concept is needed for the purpose of developing the internal senses absolutely perfectly. Every incoherence, every lack of logical and moral equilibrium obstructs and damages the evolution and progress of the chakras, discs, or lotus flowers of the astral body. The student needs a lot of patience, willpower, tenacity, and absolute conscious faith. On any given day, within dreams, while in meditation, emerges a distant picture, a landscape of nature, a feature, etc. This is a sign that there is progress. The student elevates himself little by little into imaginative knowledge. Little by little the student is removing the veil of Isis. On any given day, the plant on which he was meditating disappears. Then, a beautiful child who replaces the plant is seen. That child is the elemental of the plant, the soul of the plant. Later, during a dream, he awakens his consciousness, then he can say, I am in the astral body. The consciousness awakens little by little. In this way, the moment arrives in which the disciple will acquire continuous consciousness. When the student enjoys continuous consciousness, he no longer dreams. He can no longer dream, because his consciousness is awakened. Then, even when the physical body is sleeping, he moves himself consciously in the superior worlds. Exact meditation awakens the internal senses and performs a complete transformation of the internal bodies. Whosoever awakens consciousness has reached imaginative knowledge. He moves in the world of symbolic images. The symbols that one saw while he was dreaming are now seen without dreaming. Before, he was seeing them with a sleeping consciousness. Now he moves himself among them with a vigilant consciousness, even when his physical body is profoundly asleep. When the student reaches imaginative knowledge, he sees the symbols, but he does not understand them. He comprehends that all of nature is a living scripture that he does not know. In order to interpret the sacred symbols of great nature, the student needs to elevate himself into inspired knowledge. Inspiration. Let us now study inspiration. Inspired knowledge grants us the power of interpreting the symbols of great nature. The interpretation of symbols is very delicate. Many clairvoyants have become homicidal or have fallen into the crime of public slander because of not knowing how to interpret symbols. Symbols must be analyzed coldly without superstition, maliciousness, mistrust, pride, vanity, fanaticism, prejudgment, preconceptions, hatred, envy, greed, jealousy, etc. All defects belong to the I, to the myself, to the reincarnating ego. When the I interferes by translating and interpreting symbols, then it alters the meaning of the secret scriptures, and the clairvoyant falls into a crime which can conduct him to jail. Interpretation must be tremendously analytical, highly scientific, and essentially mystical. One has to learn how to see and how to interpret in the absence of the I, of the myself. It seems very strange to many mystics that we, the brothers and sisters of the international Gnostic movement, speak of divine clairvoyance with the penal code in hand. Those that think in this way consider spirituality as something that has nothing to do with our relationship to daily life. These people act wrongly, they are mistaken. They ignore that what each soul is in the superior worlds is the exact result of the daily life that every one of us lives in this valley of tears. If our words, thoughts, and actions are not just, then the result appears in the internal worlds and the law falls upon us. The law is the law. To be ignorant of the law does not mean the exclusion of its fulfillment. The worst sin is ignorance. To teach the one that does not know is a work of mercy. The whole tremendous responsibility of the law falls upon the clairvoyant. One has to interpret symbols of the great nature in the absolute absence of the I. Nonetheless, self-criticism must be multiplied, because when the I of the clairvoyant believes he knows a lot, then he feels himself infallible, omniscient, wise, and even supposes that he sees and interprets with the absence of the I. These types of clairvoyance fortify the I so much that they end up converting themselves into terribly perverse demons. When a clairvoyant of this type sees his inner God, then he interprets the vision in accordance with his tenebrous criteria, and exclaims, "I am doing well." We have to know how to interpret by basing ourselves on the law of philosophical analogies, on the law of correspondences, and on the numerical Kabbalah. We recommend the Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune. This book is marvelous, study it. One that has hatred, resentment, jealousy, envy, pride, etc., does not achieve elevation of himself to the second step called inspired knowledge. When we elevate ourselves to inspired knowledge, we understand and comprehend that the accidental accumulation of objects does not exist. Really, all phenomena of nature and all objects are found intimately and organically joined together, internally dependent upon each other and mutually conditioning each other. Really, no phenomena of nature can be integrally comprehended if we consider it isolated one. Everything is in incessant movement. Everything changes, nothing is quiet. In every object there is internal struggle. An object is positive and negative at the same time. Quantitative transforms itself into qualitative. Evolution is a process of the complication of energy. Inspired knowledge permits us to know the inner relationship between everything which is, has been, and will be. Matter is nothing but condensed energy. The infinite modifications of energy are absolutely unknown, as much as for historical materialism 2 as for dialectical materialism 3. Energy is equal to mass by the velocity of the light squared. We the Gnostics separate ourselves from the two antitheses of ignorance, and we integrally study man and nature. Life is every determined and determinate energy. Life is object and subject at the same time. The disciple that wants to reach the inspired knowledge must concentrate profoundly on music. The magic flute of Mozart reminds us of an Egyptian initiation. The 9 symphonies of Beethoven and many other great classical compositions elevate us to the superior worlds. The disciple, profoundly concentrated in the music, must observe himself within it, as the bee within the honey, which is the product of his whole labor. When the disciple has already reached inspired knowledge, he must then prepare himself for intuitive knowledge. Intuition. The world of intuition is the world of mathematics. The student that wants to elevate himself to the world of intuition must be a mathematician, or at least must have notions of arithmetic. Mathematical formulas grant us intuitive knowledge. The student must concentrate himself on a mathematical formula and profoundly meditate on it. Afterwards, he must empty the mind and make it completely blank, then simply wait for the inner being to teach the contained concept which is enclosed in the mathematical formula. For example, before Kepler publicly announced his famous principle that the square of the period of revolution of a planet varies directly as the distance from the Sun cubed, that formula already existed. It was contained in the solar system, even when the wise did not know it. The student can mentally concentrate himself on that formula. He must empty his mind, become drowsy with his mind completely blank, and wait for his own inner being to reveal to him all of the marvelous secrets which are contained in the formula of Kepler. The formula of Newton concerning universal gravity can also serve us in order to exercise ourselves in initiation. This formula is the following. The force between two objects varies directly with each of the masses and inversely with the square of the distance between them. If the student practices with tenacity and supreme patience, his own inner being will teach or instruct him in the great work. Then he will study at the feet of the master and he will elevate himself to intuitive knowledge. Imagination, inspiration, and intuition are obligatory steps of initiation. Whosoever has raised the 3 steps of direct knowledge has reached superconsciousness. In the world of intuition, we find only omniscience. The world of intuition is the world of the being, it is the world of the innermost. In this world the I, the myself, the ego, cannot enter. The world of intuition is the universal spirit of life. The world of imaginative knowledge is a world of symbolic images. Inspiration grants us the power of interpreting symbols. In the world of intuition, we see the great cosmic theater and we are the spectators. We assist in the great drama of life. In the world of intuition, the whole drama, which is represented in cosmic scenes, is reduced to terrific arithmetical operations. This is the amphitheatrum of cosmic science. From that region of mathematics we see that there are physical masses above and below all of the limits of external sensory perceptions. Those masses are invisible. We can perceive them only with clairvoyance. Matter is condensed energy. When its vibration is very slow, its mass is beneath the limits of external sensory perceptions. When its vibratory movement is very fast, then the mass is above the limits of external sensory perceptions. With the telescope, we can only see worlds whose degree of vibration is active within the limits of external sensory perception. Above and below the limits of external sensory perceptions there are worlds, solar systems, and constellations populated by many types of living beings. So-called matter is only energy that condenses into infinite masses. The senses of external perception only reach a fraction of what is perceivable. Dialectical materialism and metaphysics are untimely and antiquated. We, the brothers and sisters of the Gnostic movement, go in a distinct way. It is urgent that scientists study the treatise of occult science by Dr. Rudolf Steiner, great Hungarian medic, born in 1861, friend and disciple of Nietzsche and Ernest Hegel, and the founder of the Anthroposophical Society. It is indispensable that those who are lovers of science investigate in depth the whole portentous Asian wisdom, poured as a river of gold in the immortal pages of the secret doctrine. This work consists of 6 volumes and is a monument of the archaic wisdom. The great master HPB is the genius author of this precious treasury of the ancient wisdom. Those who reach superconsciousness convert themselves into true illuminated clairvoyants. No authentic clairvoyant boasts about his faculties. No legitimate clairvoyant says that he is a clairvoyant. When a true clairvoyant sees something important, he gives his concepts in a very cultured way and with supreme respect for others. He never says, "I am seeing." He always says, "We understand, we have learned." This is how all of those that have reached the ineffable summits of superconsciousness distinguish themselves by their gentility, humility, and modesty. You should read Kundalini Yoga by Sivananda. Meditate on the Blessed White Lodge. Inquire within the Gnostic treasuries. Meditate on the profound symbolism contained in each one of the arcana of the tarot. Those who reach the heights of superconsciousness enter into the amphitheater of cosmic science. The triple way of science, philosophy, and revolutionary cosmic mysticism conducts us into the ineffable regions of the Great Light. Gnosis is highly scientific, highly philosophical, and transcendentally mystical. Chapter: The Krishnamurti Case. A great conflict occurred inside the Theosophical Society during those times when Annie Besant was occupying the presidency of this marvelous organization, whose founder was the great initiate Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. The problem that presented itself was the Krishnamurti case. Lady Besant lifted her finger aloft in order to asseverate to the four winds that the Hindu boy Krishnamurti was the living reincarnation of Jesus Christ. The great clairvoyant Leadbeater and other eminent theosophists totally agreed with Lady Besant. All of them were asserting that the Hindustani boy was Jesus Christ newly reincarnated. We still remember that foundation of that order named the Star of the East, whose unique purpose was to welcome the Messiah. Later on, Krishnamurti himself dissolved it. In that epoch, a division occurred in the heart of the Theosophical Society. Some asserted that Krishnamurti was the Messiah. Others did not accept that concept, thus they withdrew from the Theosophical Society. Among those who withdrew was Dr. Rudolf Steiner, the powerful illuminated clairvoyant, eminent intellectual, founder of the Anthroposophic Society. The work of Rudolf Steiner is grandiose. His books are wells of profound wisdom. The Spanish group Marco Aurelio also withdrew from the Theosophical Society. The split that occurred in the heart of the famous Theosophical Society was a true tragedy. We need to analyze the Krishnamurti case. While some theosophists were convinced that Krishnamurti was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, others stated that he was just an ignorant boy. They stated that the only thing he knew was how to drive an automobile and play tennis, etc. So, what was the matter? Why did they not agree? What is most intriguing is that the greatest clairvoyants of the Theosophical Society were divided into two opposite camps. Absolutely logical questions emerge. Why did the clairvoyants split apart? These clairvoyants saw the internal being of the Hindu boy. Then why did they not agree? Is it perhaps because some clairvoyants see in one way and other clairvoyants in another distinct way? Is it possible that the clairvoyants contradict each other? If the clairvoyants saw the inner being of Jiddu Krishnamurti, what was the cause of their disagreement? When 1,000 people see an object with their physical sight, they say, this is a table, a chair, a rock, etc. When they see a person, they say, this is a man or a woman or a child, etc. Then, what is going on with clairvoyance? What is the reason in the concrete case of this Hindu boy in which the clairvoyants could not agree on their concepts? There is no doubt that Krishnamurti was a true puzzle for the Theosophical Society. The most critical thing was to see those clairvoyants fighting amongst themselves. This is something that confuses the minds of those that are starting in these studies. Krishnamurti fell into skepticism. He remained skeptical for many years. Yet, finally he responded and started his mission. All of us, the endoteric Gnostic brothers and sisters, proposed ourselves to investigate the Krishnamurti case in the superior worlds. After many patient works, we arrived at the following conclusions. First, every human being is a trio of body, soul, and spirit. Second, when the spirit, Chesed, Atman, defeats matter, it becomes a Buddha. Third, when the soul, Tiferet, Manas, purifies and sanctifies itself, then it is called a bodhisattva. Fourth, the spirit of Krishnamurti is a Buddha. Fifth, the soul of Krishnamurti is a bodhisattva. There are many Buddhas in Asia who have not incarnated the Christ yet. There is a ray within every human being that unites us to the Absolute. That ray is our resplendent dragon of wisdom, the internal Christ, the Sephirotic crown. The Buddhas who have not incarnated the internal Christ have not Christified themselves yet. Krishnamurti's Buddha has already incarnated his resplendent dragon of wisdom, his particular ray, his own internal Christ. When Lady Besant, Leadbeater, and other theosophists studied the Krishnamurti case, they became astonished with the splendid light of that Christified Buddha. However, since they did not know the Christic esotericism, they completely believed that Krishnamurti was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. The mistake was not in their clairvoyance. The mistake was in their lack of intellectual culture. They only knew about the theosophical septenary. They only knew about the body, soul, and spirit. Yet, they ignored that beyond these three aspects, body, soul, and spirit, every human being has a ray, the internal Christ, that unites us to the Absolute. They saw the internal God of Krishnamurti and believed that he was Jesus of Nazareth. That was their mistake. What is most critical is the damage that they perpetrated upon the Hindu boy. When a bodhisattva is told that his internal God is a master, he becomes confused, he is damaged, he develops a complex. The Hindu boy saw those instructors arguing among themselves because of him. Thus, the outcome was a psychological trauma for his human personality. Krishnamurti had a psychological trauma. There is no doubt that the theosophist clairvoyance did great damage to the Hindu boy. The theosophist hierarchs should have left the Hindu boy in peace. He would have developed himself freely in India. Then, his work would have been marvelous. The great Buddha of Krishnamurti did not give his whole message, because his bodhisattva had a psychological trauma. If we examine the doctrine of Krishnamurti, we see that the best of it is Buddhism. Unfortunately, he did not know the Christic esotericism. The Hindu body drank from the fountain of the Buddhist gospel. It is a pity that he did not know the Christic esotericism. Later on, he mixed the Buddhist philosophy with the conventional philosophy from the Western world. Thus, the doctrine of Krishnamurti is the outcome of that mixture. The doctrine of Krishnamurti is Buddhism. However, the doctrine of Aquarius is the outcome of the mixture of Buddhist esotericism with Christic esotericism. The doctrine of Krishnamurti is free Buddhism. However, the living fountain of that doctrine is the marvelous gospel of the Lord Buddha. We are not against Krishnamurti, we only regret the fact that the internal Buddha of that Hindu philosopher could not give the whole message. That is all. When a clairvoyant discovers that the innermost, the spirit, of someone is a master, then it is best for that clairvoyant to be silent, in order not to damage that person. When somebody knows that his inner being is a master, he becomes filled with pride and arrogance. Fortunately, Krishnamurti learned how to be humble. There are also fallen bodhisattvas. They are worse than demons. No one has to be told that his inner being is a master. The clairvoyant must be prudent. The clairvoyant must learn how to be silent. The spirit of someone could have achieved the degree of master in some ancient reincarnation. The bodhisattva, human soul of the master, could have fallen later on, thus now that soul can live upon the path of evil. The master never falls. The one who falls is the bodhisattva, human soul, of the master. The clairvoyant must be prudent, thus, before announcing a new master, he must wait with patience many years, in order to see how the person of flesh and bones, the terrestrial bodhisattva, behaves. The master could be very great above, yet, the person of flesh and bones, bodhisattva, here below is dangerous. In any case, by their fruits you will know them. Matthew 7 verse 15 verse R20. Madame Blavatsky stated that one of the greatest mysteries of esotericism is the mystery of the double personality. All the fights and errors of the Theosophical Society were the cause of the trauma of Krishnamurti. The Krishnamurti case is very important. Dr. Steiner knew the Christic mysteries. This is why he did not allow himself to be confused. Steiner was Gnostic. Steiner did not accept that Krishnamurti was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Many followed Steiner and many others Lady Besant. The clairvoyant Steiner had a vast intellectual culture. This is why he did not fall into that mistake. Steiner was a true Rosicrucian Gnostic. Thank you for listening.